36. Rule number 1. Never eat a raw egg before going to bed. Laura tossed and turned all night. She had all kinds of crazy, frightening nightmares. She dreamed she had come to school naked. She had been worrying so much about Gabriel and the treasures of Pig City that she hurried to school without remembering to get dressed. It was all the proof Mr. Doyle needed. As soon as he saw her without her clothes, he knew she was the one who had been writing on the board. In another dream, she was chased by a horrible monster who wore big red glasses just like Kristen's. At first she thought the monster was cute, but then she realized the glasses were Kristen's. The monster had eaten her. But the dream that scared her the most was the one where she saw her declaration of love printed on the front page of the morning newspaper. That wasn't the scary part. When she read it, it didn't say she was in love with Mr. Doyle. It said she loved Gabriel. She awoke in horror. It must have been the raw egg, she decided. I'll never eat a raw egg before going to bed again. She went to school, sneaked into Mr. Doyle's room, and wrote "Pigs wear shoes" on the blackboard. She laughed as she imagined pigs walking around wearing shoes and socks. She thought it was her funniest message yet. "Got you," said Mr. Doyle. He was sitting at his desk, pointing a camera at her. He snapped her picture. "I warned you I'd have proof today," he said. "Yet you persisted in being punctilious. Now you'll have to copy 17 pages out of this dictionary." He held up the large hardcover dictionary. It had twice as many words per page as the paperback ones. "But that's the good dictionary," said Laura. "We're almost through with it," said Mr. Doyle. "Just don't tear out any of the X, Y, or Z pages. We haven't studied those yet." He took a drink from his cup of coffee. Laura tried to think of some way out. Wait a second, she realized. We haven't been studying the dictionary. "It's the raw egg!" she exclaimed. "What?" asked Mr. Doyle. "I ate a raw egg last night," she told him. "This must be another dream. That's why I didn't see you when I entered the room. I hadn't dreamed you yet." "Are you sure about that, Laura?" asked Mr. Doyle. She nodded. "Uh-oh," she worried. She looked down, afraid she was naked again, but glad to see that this time at least she had clothes on. Then she noticed what she was wearing. It was her sister's purple and pink muumuu. She woke up laughing. She sat up in bed and looked around her room. Her clock radio said 5:29. "I tore that dress up," she remembered. She got out of bed. It was almost time to get up anyway, and she was afraid to go back to sleep. As she washed her hair, the clouds left her head and her real worries returned. Could she trust Gabriel? Would Mr. Doyle have proof? Her answers were yes and no, and she hoped she had them in the right order. She brushed her hair 100 times. She got dressed, putting on her cap last. She skipped breakfast. She was too nervous to sit and eat. She walked to school, brave and confident, or at least pretending to be. She entered the school building through the side door and made her way to Mr. Doyle's room. There was no reason not to continue writing her messages. She refused to let Mr. Doyle intimidate her. She stopped before the yellow curtain. If he was in there waiting for her with a camera, she'd tell him she'd come in to get a book. She stepped inside. He wasn't there. She had to get a book anyway. Otherwise, it would have been a lie if she had said what she was going to say, even though she never said it. She didn't have time to figure out whether that made sense or not. Book in hand, she went to the blackboard and tried to think of something clever to write. Since it might be her last message, she wanted it to be the best one she'd ever written. She remembered she wrote something hilarious in her dream, but she couldn't remember what it was. It came to her. "Pigs wear shoes." She started to write it, then stopped. She made a face. "That's not funny," she thought. It was the raw egg. She wrote "pig power" on the board, then hurried out of the room, safe. 37. Boxed. Gabriel was absent. Good, thought Laura. She hoped he was putting the treasures back into the doghouse. He'd better be. Mr. Doyle waited for everyone to settle into their seats. Without saying a word, he got up from behind his desk and walked to the blackboard. He erased "pig power," then moved to the side of the board where "dictionary" was written. He erased the number 16 and wrote 17 in its place. Then, as everyone watched in hushed silence, he began to write something inside the rectangle. He wrote the letter L, then stepped away. All of the members of Pig City and former members of Monkeytown turned and looked at Laura. She held her head high and tried to look brave. "He can't prove it," she tried to tell herself. Mr. Doyle finished writing the name inside the rectangle. The name was Lindsay. Laura had to look at it 3 times before she realized it wasn't her name. She felt dizzy with joy. The citizens of Pig City all turned and smiled at her, fists at noses. She happily returned the salutes. The rest of the class was going crazy. Everyone was talking, either about how they never would have thought it was Lindsay, or how they knew it all the time, or that there was no possible way she could copy 17 dictionary pages in just 8 days. "I didn't do it," Lindsay wailed. "It wasn't me." "Quiet, or I'll make it 18," said Mr. Doyle. Lindsay wiped her eyes. "You thought I would think it was Laura, didn't you?" asked Mr. Doyle. "Because of her hat. But I knew Laura wouldn't be foolish enough to write those messages when she was wearing a cap that says Pig City." Laura smiled. That was just what she thought Mr. Doyle would think. "You've got to believe me," Lindsay pleaded. "I told you I'd have proof, and I have it," Mr. Doyle said sternly. He turned to face the class. "My first clue came 2 weeks ago, when a teacher reported seeing Lindsay in the building before school started." "But I told you, Mr. Doyle," Lindsay pleaded. "I just came in to get a book so I could finish my homework." "Yes, I know what you told me, Lindsay," said Mr. Doyle. "At the time, I couldn't prove anything. But that was when I began to suspect you. Still waters run deep, don't they?" He turned back to the class. "Yesterday the message on the board was 'Pigs are punctilious.' You might remember that Lindsay asked me what punctilious meant. She thought she was being so clever. Odd, isn't it, Lindsay, that you didn't know what it meant, yet you pronounce it perfectly." He smiled smugly. Laura could hardly keep from laughing. "That was when I was sure it was Lindsay," Mr. Doyle continued, "but I still needed proof. I got that this morning from the librarian." He reached into the inside pocket of his sports jacket and pulled out a card like the kind found inside library books. "This is the card from Charlotte's Web," he said. "Lindsay checked out the book a month ago. It is 2 weeks overdue." "I thought I returned that book," sobbed Lindsay. "Besides, that doesn't mean anything." "As most of you know, the main character of Charlotte's Web is a pig," Mr. Doyle said. "In the book, Charlotte the Spider writes messages on her web, telling the world how great the pig is. Sound familiar?" Lindsay covered her face with her hands. "It wasn't me," she whimpered. Laura no longer thought it was funny. She felt awful. "You better stop crying and start writing," Mr. Doyle said coldly. "That is, if you want to graduate." Lindsay dropped her head into her arms, which were folded on her desk. Laura stood up. "Lindsay didn't write on the board," she stated. She took off her cap, shook her hair back off her face, and pulled the cap back on. "I did." Mr. Doyle smiled. "Thank you, Laura," he said. "That's the proof I wanted. And thank you, Lindsay, for your fine performance." "It was hard to keep from laughing," said Lindsay. She turned around and said, "Sorry, Laura, I didn't know it would be you." Her face was free of tears. Laura remained standing, too stunned to move. Mr. Doyle erased Lindsay's name and put Laura inside the box. 38. Betrayed. For the rest of the morning Laura sat like a zombie, staring off into space. She was oblivious to all that went on around her. Mr. Doyle had tricked her. "How could I have been so stupid?" she asked herself again and again. "I should have known he never suspected Lindsay, his pet." Worst of all, it happened in front of everybody. She wondered what the members of Pig City thought of her now. She never felt more ashamed in her life. 17 dictionary pages? It might as well have been a million. Today was Thursday. Next Friday was the last day of school. There was no way she'd be able to copy 17 dictionary pages in just 8 days. She was the last one out of the room for recess. Numbly, she walked outside. The rest of Pig City was waiting for her, fists at noses. Listlessly, she returned the salute. "I couldn't believe what you did," said Nathan. Laura looked sadly down at the ground. "It was so noble," finished Nathan. Laura looked up, surprised. "I was feeling sorry for Lindsay," said Debbie, "but I never would have had the courage to do what you did. It made me proud to be a member of Pig City." "The way you stood up like that," said Tiffany. "Lindsay didn't write on the board. I did. It gave me goosebumps." "It was the bravest thing I've ever seen," said Allison. Laura couldn't believe it. "I was stupid," she said. "Mr. Doyle tricked me." "You had no way of knowing that," said Kristen. "You sacrificed yourself so an innocent person wouldn't suffer." "It was noble," said Nathan. "You deserve the Nobel Prize." "It was like something Martin Luther King or George Washington would have done," said Allison. Laura felt her eyes swell with tears. She had never told Allison that she wanted to be like George Washington. I think that was the worst thing a teacher could do, said Debbie. Mr. Doyle knew how good you are. He used your goodness and your nobleness to trap you. Hey, that's right, said Aaron. He shouldn't be allowed to do that. It's not fair. It's like he's punishing you for being so good. The more they talked, the more they hated Mr. Doyle and the more they admired Laura. Let me copy your dictionary pages for you, said Tiffany. I'll help too, said Kristen. We all will, said Aaron. Everyone cheered. Nathan said, Okie dokie do. What Laura wrote on the board, she wrote for all of us, said Kristen. She did it for Pig City, and now Pig City won't let her down. They all cheered again. Laura laughed and cried at the same time. They tried to figure out the best way to divide 17 by 7. Laura shouldn't have to do any, said Debbie. We'll each do 3, and we'll still have 1 left over. Laura can write on the board again tomorrow, declared Kristen. They all laughed. Laura was proud to have such wonderful friends. She tried to tell them she'd copy her share too, but she was too choked up to speak. Let's copy only pages with dirty words, Tiffany suggested. Are there dirty words in the dictionary? Asked Allison. She was shocked. Haven't you ever read the sex page? Asked Tiffany. It's full of words starting with sex. And the definitions are great, Kristen added. I'll copy that page, said Tiffany. I'll copy the page with urine on it, said Debbie. They all tried to think of good pages to copy. I get excrement, said Kristen, and dung. And feces, too. I'll do those 3. Ass, said Nathan. I know ass is in the dictionary, even if they're just talking about the donkey. Tinkle, said Debbie. Buttocks, said Aaron. Oh, I just thought of a great word, said Allison, but I can't say it. She blushed. Is it a part of the body? Asked Tiffany. We should think of a way to get even with Lindsay, said Debbie. She was in on it, too. But she said she didn't know it was Laura, said Aaron. So, ignorance is no excuse, said Nathan. We'll figure out a way to get Lindsay into trouble, this time for real, said Debbie. No one should make it through the year without copying at least 1 page. Hey, said Kristen, what's going on over there? There was a big commotion in the center of the playground. It was Gabriel. He was marching around the blacktop. Music blared out of a huge portable stereo that he held in the air. There was some kind of white cloth hanging from the top of it, like a flag. As he got closer, the music became clearer. Pick my nose, I just love to pick my nose. It is so much fun. Aaron turned pale. My underpants, screamed Kristen. Kristen's underpants were hanging from Gabriel's stick. That was his flag. I'm in love with every girl, every girl, every girl. I'm in love with every girl in Mr. Doyle's class. Aaron covered his ears with his hands and ran. Kristen rushed toward Gabriel. Tiffany, Allison, Debbie, and Nathan hurried after her. Laura took a couple of steps, then remained where she was. Gabriel swung the stick around over his head until Kristen's underpants flew off into the air. A group of boys jumped for them. Kristen screamed. Her underpants were passed from one boy to another as she helplessly chased after them. At first the other members of Pig City tried to help her, but they soon had problems of their own, as Gabriel continued to pass around the treasures. Extra, extra, read all about it, he shouted, holding Tiffany's newspaper high in the air. Tiffany's ticklish! Tiffany was chased out of the crowd by a mob of would-be ticklers. It's your fault, Laura, she shouted as she ran past her. Laura knew Tiffany was right. The music started again. I am such a stupid jerk, stupid jerk, stupid jerk. A boy tossed Kristen's underpants up at the basketball hoop. He missed. Several other boys jumped for the rebound. There were several more attempts at the basket until the underpants finally got stuck, draped over the rim. I don't have a brain. Kristen stared forlornly up at her underpants. Her face was streaked with tears. I hate you, Laura, she yelled in a voice Laura hardly recognized. The ticklers caught up with Tiffany. She rolled around in the grass, laughing herself to pieces. I'm in love with every girl in Mr. Doyle's class. Gabriel took out the tape and put in a new one. Hey, everybody, listen to this. Everyone quieted down. Hello, may I talk to Howard, please? I think that was his mother. Laughter. Howard! Oh, Howard, is it really you? This is your secret admirer. I love you, Howard. You're so handsome. Passionately. I love you passionately. I can't tell you. I'm afraid you'll break my heart. Laughter. That was Debbie. She just called Howard and told him she loved him passionately. Didn't you, Debbie?" "Yes, that was me. I'm Debbie. I disguised my voice because I love Howard so much, and I'm afraid he won't love me back." Laughter. The crowd was hysterical. Everyone jeered at Debbie as she ran into the girls' bathroom. The art teacher put her hand on Gabriel's shoulder. She took the boombox from him, then collected the other treasures, except for Kristen's underpants, which she couldn't reach. She made Gabriel sit on a bench for the rest of the recess. "I trusted you, Laura," said Allison with tears in her eyes. Laura didn't know what to say. "The whole school has seen me naked," Allison sobbed. "Hey, Allison," a boy called, "when are you going to be in Playboy?" She covered her face with her hands and ran. "Uh-oh," said another boy. "It's Laura. We better be good. She might tell her boyfriend, Mr. Doyle." They laughed. "Will you invite us to the wedding? How many children are you going to have?" When the bell rang, she headed back to class alone. She wasn't George Washington or Martin Luther King anymore. She was Richard Nixon. "Well, don't expect me to copy any of your dictionary pages for you," Aaron said to her. "I don't," said Laura. "I don't expect anything from anybody." "Hi, Laura, what's new?" asked Gabriel. He was stretched out on the bench with his hands behind his head, smiling smugly. 39. Judgment Day. Gabriel wrote his name on the blackboard under the word dictionary, just beneath the box with Laura in it. He walked proudly back to his seat. Everyone else remained absolutely silent as Mr. Doyle looked through the treasures of Pig City laid out across his desk. No one dared laugh. "Kristen," Mr. Doyle said. "Yes, sir." "Your underpants are in the office. You can pick them up after school." "Yes, sir." "In the future," he said, "keep them under your pants. That's why they're called underpants. A word to the wise." Still no one laughed. "Allison, will you come here, please?" Allison's face was red with embarrassment as she stood up in front of a room full of kids, all of whom had seen her naked. She walked to Mr. Doyle's desk. "You were a very cute baby," he said. He returned her picture to her. "Thank you," said Allison. She tore the picture to bits and dropped it in the trash, then returned to her seat. "Nathan!" Mr. Doyle thundered. Nathan shut his eyes tight, scrunching his face. Up to now he was the only one who had been spared. He stood and slowly walked to meet his doom. "Did you write this?" asked Mr. Doyle. He scrunched his face even tighter as he looked at his letter. "Dear Mr. Doyle, you stink. You are the most ugliest teacher in the school. You're too stupid to be a teacher, and you have bad breath. I hate you. Sincerely, Nathan." "Yes, sir," he squeaked. Mr. Doyle frowned and shook his head. "Do you realize how bad this is?" he asked. "It wasn't wise, was it?" said Nathan. "No, it wasn't," said Mr. Doyle. "Most ugliest? You know better than that, Nathan. It's either ugliest or most ugly, but never most ugliest. We studied superlatives at the beginning of the year." Nathan's face slowly unscrunched. "Look how you spelled your," Mr. Doyle continued. "You're too stupid to be a teacher. When you spell your that way, it's a possessive. Your book, your house, your foot. In this letter, you meant to use it as a contraction for you are, didn't you?" I guess so." "Then how would it have been spelled?" Nathan wiped his face. "YOU''RE. Why didn't you spell it correctly the first time?" Nathan shrugged. "I don't know what's the matter with you, Nathan. You're about to graduate, and you've forgotten everything you've learned. Look at this. You're too stupid to be a teacher, and you have bad breath." Never begin a sentence with the word and. You could have made it all one sentence. You're too stupid to be a teacher, and you have bad breath. Or else you could have kept it as two sentences, but without the word and. You're too stupid to be a teacher. You have bad breath. Do you see what I'm saying? Nathan nodded. "Okay, now I want you to go to your seat and rewrite this letter so that there are no mistakes." Nathan returned to his desk. His eyes appeared to be spinning. "Aaron?" "Yes, Mr. Doyle?" His face was red. "I was able to hear this tape during recess. Do you want it erased, or shall I have it for posterity?" "Erase it." It became redder. "Are you certain? You have a very nice voice. Have you ever taken singing lessons?" "No. Erase it, please." And redder. "Do you like the opera?" "I never heard it." And redder. "You should listen to it sometime," said Mr. Doyle. "You might consider being an opera singer when you grow up." "I'll think about it," said Aaron. "Please erase the tape." Mr. Doyle put the tape back into the machine and erased it. "Debbie, erase it," said Debbie. "Can I have it?" chirped Howard. Mr. Doyle erased Debbie's tape. "Tiffany?" Tiffany walked to his desk. He told her it was a very funny article. She didn't agree. She threw it into the trash. "Laura!" Mr. Doyle bellowed. Laura shook her hair back. She wasn't wearing the cap. It was stuffed in her desk. She walked to the front of the room. She saw her declaration of love on Mr. Doyle's desk. She wasn't embarrassed. She felt nothing except hatred for Gabriel. The Pig City roster was on his desk too. Pig City, Laura, President. Tiffany, Vice President. Allison, Secretary. Kristen, Underpants. Debbie called up Howard and told him she loved him passionately. Yolanda, note to Jonathan. Nathan, letter to Mr. Doyle. Aaron, song. "What happened to Yolanda's note?" asked Mr. Doyle. "What do you need that for?" "I was just curious," he smiled. "I imagine it was quite a note." "You're right, it's none of my business. Well, you've had a rough time of it today, haven't you? First the dictionary pages, and now this. I suppose everybody in Pig City blames you." "I'm responsible," she said. "I guess that's what being a leader is all about, isn't it?" He picked up the Declaration of Love. "I'm very flattered." She shrugged. 17 dictionary pages is a lot, isn't it?" he said. "I can't very well ask someone who loves me to copy that many." He smiled. "How about if we just call it 7?" "No, I'll do 17," said Laura. "I don't love you any more." She dropped her declaration into the wastebasket and returned to her seat. 40. Bushwhacked. Gabriel was the most popular kid at school. Even Jonathan and Yolanda were impressed by what he had done. "You were fantastic, Gabe," said Howard. "Can I please have your autograph?" He handed Gabriel a torn sheet of notebook paper and a pencil. Gabriel smiled. He took the paper and pencil from Howard and boldly signed his name. "Here you go, Howard." "Thanks, Gabe," said Howard. "I bet you'll be famous some day." Gabriel laughed. "Howard, do you want to copy a dictionary page too?" asked Mr. Doyle. "No," said Howard. He hurried out of the room. Mr. Doyle followed him out, leaving only Gabriel and Laura. No one from Pig City had spoken to Laura since recess. They'd been teased and or tickled all day. Anybody who didn't know about the treasures soon found out. Laura stood up and walked to the metal closet. She tore 17 pages out of a dictionary, one at a time. She didn't bother looking for pages with pictures or bad words. She returned to her desk without even glancing at Gabriel. Sheila was waiting for Howard by the bike racks. "Did you get it?" she asked. "No problem," he said. Then he gave her the piece of paper with Gabriel's autograph on it. Sheila looked at it. "Good job." "Thanks," said Howard. "Hey, Sheila." "What?" "Do you think Debbie really likes me?" "Of course not. Why would she like you?" Laura looked up as Gabriel put his completed dictionary pages on Mr. Doyle's desk. She tried to burn a hole through his brain with her eyes. He turned and faced her. "What's your problem?" he asked. She didn't say anything. He shrugged, took a couple of steps toward the curtain, then stopped. He sighed and turned around. "If you want, I'll help you copy some of your dictionary pages. I wrote on the board, too." "Go away," she said coldly. "I hate you." "Don't tell me you thought I believed you ate a raw egg." "I never lie." "Right," said Gabriel, "just like the note you said I wrote." "I showed it to you. It proved I was telling the truth." "Come on. Do you really think I don't know what I wrote? Besides, anyone could see it had been changed." "I ate the egg." "Tell me another one." He walked out through the curtain. She hated him. She waited a few minutes to make sure he was gone, then took her 17 pages and left. She hadn't copied a single word. "I won't do them," she thought as she headed home. "Then Mr. Doyle will have to flunk me. Maybe I'll spend my whole life stuck in the 6th grade." She smiled bitterly. "That'll show Mr. Doyle. He'll be sorry he ever did this to me." She imagined herself 20 years old in Mr. Doyle's class, still owing him 17 dictionary pages. "I'm sorry I ever tricked you," he'd say. "Let me copy your dictionary pages for you." "No," she'd tell him. "I can't graduate until I copy them myself. It's your fault. You made the rules." She'd be in all the newspapers. 20-year-old girl stuck in 6th grade. Everybody would know about the mean trick Mr. Doyle had played on her, how he used her goodness and turned it around to suit his own evil purposes. He'd be the most hated man in the country. She sighed. She didn't really hate Mr. Doyle. She didn't love him, but she didn't hate him either. She hated Gabriel. "I hate Gabriel," she shouted to an empty street. She wondered if she'd ever meet a boy she'd like. The boys will be more mature next year in junior high, she thought. "I'll have lots of boyfriends, if I ever graduate." She walked past the Hollow Creek apartment complex. There was a brick wall about 4 feet high, which separated the apartment complex from the sidewalk. She wondered what her first boyfriend would look like. He'll have dark hair, maybe a little curly. He'll be smart, but he wouldn't study all the time. He'd be good at sports, and also be interested in other things like art and books. And he'll beat up Gabriel. She smiled. Then suddenly her head jerked back and banged against the brick wall. "Oh," she said very quietly. Someone was pulling her hair from behind the wall. She couldn't turn around. She tried to reach back with her arms. Her eyes watered from the pain. Suddenly the pulling stopped, and she fell to her knees on the sidewalk. She felt dizzy. She sat up against the wall and took several deep breaths. Her head throbbed. A great mass of hair lay on the sidewalk next to her. She didn't know what it was at first. It was very odd looking, like some kind of strange animal. It took her a while to recognize it as hair. A few seconds later, she realized where it had come from. 41. A wig. Laura felt the top of her head, then slowly moved her hand down along her hair until she came to the place where it had been cut, just above her shoulders. It had been cut with scissors, although at the time it had felt like someone had just ripped it out of her head. Not all of her hair was cut off. Long strands still remained on either side of her head, but a large clump out of the middle was gone. On the sidewalk next to her hair, she saw a torn piece of notebook paper. She picked it up. On it was written, "Pigs are bald." Underneath that, Gabriel had signed his name. Laura's blood curdled with hatred. She trembled, then tears began to flow. She began gathering up as much of the hair off of the ground as she could. In the end, she could barely see through her watery eyes as she picked up the hairs, one at a time, off the dirty sidewalk. Maybe somebody can make a wig out of it, she hoped. I can wear it until my hair grows back. She stood up, then a wave of dizziness rushed over her. She steadied herself, then started home, walking, then running, then walking again. She came to a block where garbage cans had been set up on the curb in front of each house. The cans were empty. The garbage men had come and gone. She made it halfway down the block, then stopped. She dropped her hair into an old silver trash can. She leaned over and looked at it, swirled at the bottom for the last time. When she got home, she took 2 steps inside the house, then ran into her mother's arms. Her mother telephoned her father, who rushed home from work early. "Do you know who did it?" asked her father. "No," she answered. It was her first lie in 6 years, but so what? Her hair was cut off anyway. She could lie all the time now. Her parents took her to the doctor to make sure she wasn't seriously hurt. The doctor said she was fine. She had a bump on the back of her head, but no concussion. "Do I have to go to school tomorrow?" Laura asked. "Yes," the doctor told her. "No," her parents said sympathetically. The doctor suggested that they report the assault to the police, but Laura talked her parents out of it. What were they going to do, she thought, arrest Gabriel for giving me an illegal haircut? She remembered that Gabriel had tried to call a truce. She was the one who had told him that there were no rules in a war. She went to bed early. It had been the worst day of her life, and she didn't want to drag it on any longer. In the morning, she'd have to get started on her dictionary pages. Her parents came in and kissed her good night as she lay with her head on her pillow. "Tomorrow we'll go to the beauty parlor," said her mother. "They'll just cut off more," she whined. "Oh, just enough to make it even," said her father. "We'll go to the fanciest, most expensive hairstylist in town," said her mother. "It'll be very exciting. We'll get you something very exotic." Laura tried to smile. "At least I won't have to spend an hour washing and combing it every day." "That's right," said her father. "Probably just towel it dry," said her mother. Laura rolled over and then started crying. "I never told a lie," she whimpered. "We know, baby," whispered her mother. 42. The Conquering Hero. Gabriel walked to school on Friday morning, whistling the Monkeytown song and snapping his fingers. He was met by Sheila and Howard. They stuck their right thumbs in their ears and wiggled their fingers. He did the same. "We got her, Gabe," said Howard. "We got her even better than you did." "What?" he asked. "Who?" Howard looked at Sheila, then back at Gabriel. "Laura," he said. "You'll see when she comes to school." "If she comes to school," said Sheila. "She's so vain she probably won't." "I bet she doesn't come to school for the rest of the year," laughed Howard. Sheila laughed too. "What'd you do to her?" asked Gabriel. Howard looked to Sheila. "Maybe we shouldn't tell him," said Sheila. "Maybe he's still in love with her." "What?" Gabriel exclaimed. "Me in love with Laura? I saw the note you wrote her, said Sheila. What note? Oh, was there more than one? She turned to Howard. He wrote Laura a note telling her he knew all about Pig City, but promised never, ever to tell. She put both hands over her heart. It was so sweet. Howard laughed. Things began to click inside Gabriel's head. You changed it, he uttered. Didn't she want to kiss you? Laughed Sheila. She told Howard how she had reworded Gabriel's note. Howard laughed too. Who would want to kiss Laura? He asked. She's so ugly. She asked me to join Pig City, but I told her to drop dead. Gabriel laughed. That's pretty funny, Howie, he said. So how'd you get her yesterday? We bushwhacked her, said Howard. We cut her hair off, said Sheila, just like I said I would. You and Karen didn't have the guts to do it, but Howard did. I held her hair while Sheila cut it off, said Howard. She never even saw who did it, said Sheila. She's practically bald, laughed Howard. He was still laughing when Gabriel's fist smashed into his teeth. He fell to the ground. His lip was bleeding. Gabriel grabbed Sheila by her shirt collar. She screamed. Hey, shouted the yard teacher. She started toward them. Now you'll be sorry, said Gabriel. Sheila laughed in his face. What are you going to do? Tell on me? Are you a tattletale? He didn't know what to do. He never told on anyone before. You better let me go, warned Sheila. Besides, Laura thinks you did it, so you're in on it too. How? Why does she think I did it? Remember that autograph you signed for Howard? I wrote pigs are bald over it and dropped it next to her hair. She'll never love you now. Gabriel, shouted the yard teacher, hurrying toward them. Let her go. He let go of her. Then he slugged her in the face. 43. The New Laura. Laura stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. I look like a French poodle, she said. I don't know of any poodles who spend over $100 for a haircut, said her father, standing behind her. She made a face. She didn't recognize herself. You wasted your money, she said. You should have just taken me to the Pink Poodle. That's where Allison's dog gets his hair cut. Her father laughed. Now you tell me, he said. In front, covering her forehead, she had long curly bangs. They looked like springs that had sprung. The rest of her hair formed a big wave that started just behind her bangs and cascaded down to the back of her neck, where it suddenly turned wild and frizzy, like a wave crashing on the shore. In front of each ear she had a long coil of hair. Several other coils adorned her hair in various places. They looked like ribbons on a birthday present. The most amazing thing about it was that all she had to do was wash it, then dry it with a towel, and it would bounce back into shape all by itself. She stuck out her tongue at her reflection, then turned and walked back into her room. She sat at her desk. She still hadn't copied any of her dictionary pages. It was Saturday, 2 days since the worst day of her life. Monday she'd have to go to school again, where everyone would laugh at her. She opened her desk drawer, took out her pocket calculator, and busily pressed the buttons. She figured out it would take 6 years and 5 months for her hair to grow back. Somewhere she had heard that hair grows 3/4 of an inch every month. She wondered if she'd have any friends by then. She knew she certainly wouldn't have a boyfriend. No boy would want to kiss a French poodle. 6 years and 5 months, she thought. I might as well be in prison. She looked through the dictionary pages. Why didn't I at least choose pages with pictures? She shook her head. She remembered it was Gabriel who had told her about picking pages with pictures. Of course, I didn't listen to him. I don't listen to anybody. I think I'm better than everybody else. No one can tell me anything. I thought Jonathan was conceited, but I was even more conceited than him. She sighed. It was all my own fault, she realized. It's no wonder everybody hates me. That's what I get for trying to be such a big shot, playing all those silly games. Who did I think I was? George Washington? George Washington wouldn't have made someone give him her underpants. She promised herself that in the future she'd be different. She wouldn't be the president of any club because she wasn't better than anybody else. No more tricks, no more games, no more lies. She nodded. I lied all the time, she admitted. Even if my words weren't actual lies, they were lies all the same. I lied to myself, too. I'm glad my hair was cut off. I deserved it. Thank you, Gabriel. From now on, there will be a new Laura Sibbie, she decided, and maybe, in 6 years and 5 months, somebody will like me. The doorbell rang. Oh, please don't be for me, she prayed. Laura, there's somebody here to see you, her father called. She didn't want to see anyone. She didn't want anyone to see her, not for 6 years and 5 months. Laura, her father shouted. She stayed still. There was a knock on her door. Then her father stepped inside. "Laura, you have a visitor," he said. She gave him a look that said, "Can't you tell her I'm not home?" He ignored it. She shrugged her shoulders, got up from her desk, sighed, then walked out of her bedroom and down the hall. Gabriel was waiting just inside the front door, holding a bunch of flowers. 44. Kiss me. Gabriel stared at her with his mouth open. "Wow," he uttered. "You look like a movie star." She waited for him to say something like, "You could play Frankenstein without a mask," but he didn't. He just stared at her hair. These are for you," he said. He blushed as he held out the flowers. They were daisies, white with yellow centers. She took the flowers. She would have ripped them to bits and thrown them in his face, but nobody had ever given her flowers before. She brought them to her nose. "They're not the kind that smell," he said. She stared at him. She wondered how he could dare show his face at her house after what he did to her. "You could be on the cover of a magazine," said Gabriel. "You look so elegant." She shook her hair back, although it didn't shake back any more. She wondered if Gabriel really liked it or if he was just saying it because he didn't want her to get him in trouble for cutting it. "From what they said, I thought they practically shaved your head," he said. "But what are you talking about? Who?" "Howard and Sheila. They're the ones who did it to you. It wasn't me. They tried to frame me by dropping a piece of paper with my name on it." "It was your handwriting," said Laura. "I know," said Gabriel. "Howard tricked me into signing it. Can you believe it? Howard," he smiled. "He said he wanted my autograph. I guess that's what I get for thinking I was such a hot shot." Laura didn't know whether to believe him or not. "Howard confessed everything to Mr. Doyle," said Gabriel. "I was there. No one else knows anything about it. Boy, you should have seen Mr. Doyle. I thought he was going to kill them. He was so mad at them, he didn't punish me for giving Sheila a bloody nose," he smiled. "Mr. Doyle's all right. I can see why you're in love with him." "I'm not in love with him," said Laura. "I like him, but I don't love him." "Oh, you gave Sheila a bloody nose?" "I gave Howard a fat lip, too. I couldn't believe what they did to you. It made me so mad. It was such a mean thing to do, especially since," he paused, "you never told a lie." Laura raised her eyebrows. "I'm sorry for not believing you. But how—" "Sheila was the one who changed the note. She saw me put it in your desk, and she took it out and changed it. She's the one who wrote that you had to kiss me, or else I'd tell everyone about Pig City. How could, can't you see why You shouldn't have called me a liar." "I know. I'm sorry." Laura looked at the flowers, then at Gabriel. "I have a vase in the doghouse." They walked through the kitchen, out the back door, and across the yard to the clubhouse. On top of the bookcase was a clear blue vase with a peacock feather in it. Laura removed the feather, dropped it on the floor, and put the daisies in the vase. She placed it back on the bookcase. She figured she'd add water later. Gabriel sat in the swinging chair. Laura remembered that this was where he sat the last time he was in the doghouse. She sat on the bed again. What did the note say before Sheila changed it? Gabriel looked down at the ground. "I told you that I knew all about Pig City, but I promised not to tell anybody. I also wrote that you had pretty hair, but then I erased it because—" he blushed. "But I never said it was ugly. Sheila wrote that too." "But how did you ever find out about Pig City?" "Oh," he said. He smiled sheepishly. "I didn't. I heard you and Tiffany and Allison talking about it, but I had no idea what it was. I was hoping the note would trick you into telling me. I'm sorry. I'm always playing tricks on people, and then they backfire on me." "I know what you mean," Laura grumbled. "I'm really sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for trying to trick you, and for not believing you, and for bringing all those treasures to school." Laura looked at his sad brown eyes. She wondered what would have happened if Sheila hadn't changed the note. Gabriel's trick probably would have worked. She probably would have asked him to join Pig City, but that wouldn't have been so bad. She wondered what she would have asked him to do for insurance. Wear a dress or kiss her. But that was the old Laura. The new Laura didn't play those kinds of games. "When you asked me to join Pig City," he said, "that was the happiest moment of my life. I just wanted you to like me. That's all I ever wanted." She felt a warm tingle inside her. "I don't blame you for hating me. If I were you, I'd hate me too. Even if I weren't you, I'd probably still hate me. I hate myself and I am me." She didn't hate him. She knew he didn't do anything she wouldn't have done if she were him. "No more tricks," Gabriel promised. He crossed his heart. "No more tricks," Laura agreed. Gabriel shook his head. "I just wish Is there anything I can do to make it up to you? He asked. She held back a smile. You don't even have to forgive me. I just don't want you to hate me for the rest of your life. She thought he had beautiful eyes. I'll do anything you say, he said. She picked up the peacock feather and gently brushed it across the floor. There is one thing you could do, she said very quietly. What? He asked. She smiled sweetly. Eat a raw egg. 45. The final bell. Now they were even. The final week of school is usually the most exciting week of the year, but compared to the last 4 weeks, it was nothing. Sheila and Howard weren't there. They were suspended from school for the last week, but they would still go on to junior high next year. Everyone had something to say about Laura's new hairstyle. Almost everybody said they liked it, but she didn't care. George Washington didn't care what people said about his hair, which was a good thing, she thought, since his hair was white and stiff. On the final day of school, Laura handed in her 17 completed dictionary pages. Mr. Doyle was shocked. After all that had happened, he no longer expected her to do them. He thought she knew that. She did. She did them anyway. Allison, Tiffany, Gabriel, Kristen, Debbie, Nathan, Aaron, Yolanda, Jonathan, Karen, and even Lindsay all helped. Lindsay said she felt bad about tricking Laura. Besides, she wanted to find out what it was like to copy a dictionary page. They'd had a dictionary page copying party, but if Mr. Doyle ever noticed some of the words they had copied, well, they didn't know what he'd do. Besides, it would be too late. Laura's friends liked her again. They even liked Gabriel, since he and she were together. The final bell rang. Laura was no longer a sixth grader. She felt strangely sad as she walked through the yellow curtain for what she thought would be the last time. Laura! Mr. Doyle called after her. She turned around and stepped back into the room. Mr. Doyle was standing at attention. His fist was at his nose. She returned the salute.